Hello, everyone. I'm back again to read to you the fourth myth, I believe, in Cynthia Ryland's The Beautiful Stories of Life, 6 Greek Myths Retold. I promised it's going to be a happier one, and it will. So sit back and enjoy it. This is the myth of Pygmalion. Pygmalion was a coward. No one knew this, for he always looked so good. He was a sculptor, and his work was admired far and wide. Whenever he went into the city, young women would smile at him, linger near the fountain where he stood. Pygmalion would make a very fine husband. Pygmalion, however, pretended not to notice the admiration. He pretended not to care. And to all the world, it seemed as if Pygmalion was comfortable simply being alone. This was partly true. Pygmalion, in fact, did wish for a wife. He was lonely. Pygmalion wanted love, and he wanted to be loved by someone. Someone who would bring him fruit and cheese when he was hungry during long hours of work. Someone who would smile at him and admire his craft. Someone who might lovingly apply oil to his aching hands. Perhaps it was not love that Pygmalion wanted so much as notice. But with all those girls surveying him in the marketplace, Pygmalion could most assuredly have had a wife of his own. So why did he turn a cold eye to them? Because he was afraid. There are many kinds of courage among men, and one of the most undervalued is the courage to relinquish control. Pygmalion feared women because he could not control them. He had molded every aspect of his life according to his desires. He had built his own house according to his precise specifications. He ate the food he most preferred. He went to bed when he pleased, which was often in the middle of the day. Pygmalion wanted no intrusion into his careful routine. He wanted life on his own terms, and this naturally made him a very unhappy man, with power over everything but his loneliness. One day in the city, Pygmalion came upon the most perfect piece of ivory marble he had ever encountered. He slowly ran his fingers over it and, with his artist's touch, knew it to be in some way magical. He paid an enormous sum for it and brought it home. Later that night, in the solitude of his studio, Pygmalion stood before the exquisite ivory marble and felt such a yearning, such an aching as he had never felt before. And without a sketch or even a clear thought in his mind of what he was about to do, Pygmalion picked up his chisel and began to work. Pygmalion worked all night in a kind of trance. Then all the next day and into the next night, he did not eat or sleep or even sit to rest his body and hands. He chiseled and polished until he could no longer stand upright. Overcome with exhaustion, he collapsed on the floor beside the stone and slept for many hours. When finally he awoke, it was evening. Pygmalion opened his eyes, lifted his head, and looked up at what he had created. It was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Slowly, Pygmalion stood up and gazed at the ivory creature who gazed back at him. Her eyes were so kind. Carefully, he touched her. He ran his fingers up her smooth arm and felt something within him stir. He was entranced. Pygmalion spent most of the following days and nights, weeks and months in the company of the woman he had made. She was perfection. He talked to her as he worked and told her everything. All his secrets, all his fears, all his guilt and shame and regret, all his dreams. She listened, and her eyes carried no judgment. One day, Pygmalion realized he must be in love with her. How else do you explain the profound attachment? He had fallen in love with his own creation. It was at that moment of illumination when Pygmalion realized his true feelings, that the goddess Aphrodite became involved. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, was always involved when that suddenly became the story of someone's life. She watched as Pygmalion fell deeply in love with the woman he had created. She watched as his carefully controlled life fell to pieces. Pygmalion let his house become a shambles. He didn't care what food he ate and went to sleep not when he chose, but when sleep chose him. Aphrodite watched as Pygmalion let go his perfectly controlled life for love, and she was pleased. In time, the annual feast day to the goddess arrived. Mortals journeyed to her altars to ask her favors in love. For the first time in his life, Pygmalion joined them. Having gone so deep into a life so strange, he now no longer cared what anyone might think of him, including a goddess. He needed her help. Pygmalion went to the altar of Aphrodite and asked for only one thing. He asked her to make the woman he loved real. That evening, Pygmalion arrived home with a heavy heart. He had little hope his prayer might be answered, and the pain of his yearning, having been revealed, was greater than ever. Stepping inside his dark studio, Pygmalion did what he had always done upon returning. He went to his love to look at her and to touch her. She was there, as always, waiting. And as always, Pygmalion bent to kiss her lovely marble hand. When he did so, his lips suddenly warmed. The man's heart nearly stopped beating. Pygmalion dared not believe it. He moved his fingers up the pale, smooth arm, and it was no longer hard, no longer cold. Pygmalion then found the courage to look in her eyes. And when he did, the woman he loved looked back. She was alive. Pygmalion married her. And because he had revealed to her all that he was over those many months when she was but a statue, this woman, newly made, but with a long memory, was more devoted to him than even Aphrodite could have imagined. She bore him a son to whom Pygmalion taught all he knew about both art and love, but mostly about love. See, I told you it was happier. It's a weird story, but it's a happy one. So next time, you will not be so lucky. The next myth is the story of Narcissus. So check that out if you want. I will see you then. Bye.